out everybody for the little delay. And something was talking to me there. I'll let that go. Okay, my name is Mike Leonard. I've been in the group forever, like since 1985. So that's forever, pretty much. Been the president of the group and been a columnist for the Herald Times in Bloomington, Indiana for a long time. And I teach various things in the media school at Indiana. Lately, in particular, what I liked best was teaching opinion writing. So that kind of helps in this situation here. So that's who I am. Now, for Jerry, I talked to him a little bit, and he said, just I told him how good his bio was, and he said you can just read it, and so I can read, so we'll just do it that way. Because actually, who writes funny bios, right? That guy does. So at any rate, Jerry, okay, Zezima, is it proper? Unmute, or is it Zezima? I always said Zezima. Yeah. Is Jerry muted for everybody?
There we go.
Okay, good.
That was a mute point.
That's you're going to hear more of this.
Yeah. Yeah, hang
So
up now.
Zezima, is that your preferred?
Zezima. I couldn't pronounce it till I was in high school, but yes, Zezima.
Well, that's what you get for standing at the end of the line. If you weren't
Yes.
a Z person and you were an A person, you'd have gotten there earlier. But at any rate, so Jerry Zezima writes a weekly humor column for Tribune News Service, which distributes it to over 600 papers nationwide and abroad. If you've ever wondered why the newspaper industry is in trouble, it would be because of him. Zezima is the author of 8 books: Leave It to Boomer, The Empty Nest Chronicles, Grandfather Knows Best, Nene and Poppy's Excellent Adventures, Every Day is Saturday, One for the Ageless, The Good Humor Man, and The More the Merrier, all of which are crimes against literature. They also come in handy for propping up wobbly table legs. So if you suffer from insomnia, you might even want to read them. You never know. As a chilling example of just how low journalistic standards have sunk, he has won many awards, including 9 for humorous writing from the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, of which he was president from 2014 to 2016. It is believed that beer was involved in the voting. Zezima has a strong social media presence as well. He's made many radio and television appearances and has been on national podcasts. He's done several YouTube videos. He's a popular public speaker, which goes without saying. And he's writing a sitcom right now. Maybe we'll learn more about that. And if you think TV is bad now, he says, wait until his show gets on the air. And just selfless promotion, he does have a blog. It's jerryzezima.blogspot.com. So Jerry lives on Long Island with his wife Sue. They have 2 daughters, 5 grandchildren, and many creditors. And he has no interesting hobbies. So this says a lot about this guy, I think, right here. It's like, who writes funny bios like that? So I guess, Jerry, just to start out with, that a lot of people are here because they enjoy writing humor, want to learn how to write humor better, that sort of thing. Was there a point in your career where you kind of felt like I'm being moved into this lane, or were you moving in that lane because you liked it so much?
I moved into that lane because I was cut off by a maniacal driver. But I always wanted to do that. It wasn't like I was like forced into it. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in high school. And my decision could be encapsulated in one word: algebra. I could never do algebra. I was always better in subjects where you really didn't have to know the answers, like English composition.
Mhm.
So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with this. When they were in school, they had to write on a particular topic and then get up in front of the class to read it. Well, we did. And nobody wanted to do this except me. Everyone took it seriously except me. So I wrote the silliest, stupidest, dumbest, funniest stuff I could think of. I got up in front of the class and read my essay and got big laughs. So I thought maybe I could do this. So fast forward through college. I didn't write for the high school paper. I didn't write for the college paper because I was goofing off. I was just an idiot. So a year out of college, I walked into the office of the Stamford Advocate, my hometown paper in Connecticut, and just announced that I wanted a job. And the editor said, well, what experience do you have? I said, I don't have any. So instead of throwing me out, he gave me a test. And I did well enough because I was hired, but there were some questions to which I did not know the answers. So I remembered what I did on that essay in high school. And I wrote down the silliest, stupidest, dumbest stuff I could think of. And later on, the editor said, that's what got you the job. It showed signs of creativity. So I was going to say, I don't think you're supposed to make stuff up in a newspaper, but for once in my life, I kept my mouth shut. And I was hired, and it took me 9 years to get a humor column. But when I was a kid in Stamford, I would read the Stamford Advocate, and I saw Art Buchwald's column and Irma Bombeck's column. I said, that's what I want to do. I was the class clown in school, and I said, how can I parlay this into a career? So I bluffed my way into journalism, and I was a succession of things. I was a copy boy, I was a sports writer, I was a feature writer, I was an editor. And finally, in 1985, they gave me a humor column, and I've been writing it ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So I just bluffed my way into it.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
For sure. And we talked earlier, and it's worth bringing up again that I was telling Jerry that, I've done general interest and reporting and all that other stuff, as well as column writing. And I teach opinion writing, and I give the students a choice, do you want to be a general interest columnist and so on, and let them choose. And I tell them that the most fun is to be a humor columnist.
Yes.
And the most dangerous thing you can do is be a humor columnist, because with a regular column, if it's not very good, I tell them, it's like, okay, then report. And you can pad that thing, at least that awful thing that's not working has content. But if you're a humor writer, it either works or you fall on your face.
Well, it's the most objective kind of writing, as you said. It's either what's funny to one person isn't to another. But I found that people love humor as long as it's not cruel or mean-spirited. So I poke fun at myself because I'm a rich target. Well, maybe not rich, according to my wife and the IRS, but it's that kind of thing. And you and I had spoken last week about this, and I found that there are two things that make people laugh. One is something sudden, like the punchline to a joke, and it takes you by surprise, and you laugh at the recognition. And the other thing is the exact opposite. It's the familiar. It's something you see yourself in, and you laugh at the familiarity. And so that's more like the kind of stuff that I do. And I know there are humor writers, humor columnists, humorists who write about social issues and poke fun at that, and they're open more to criticism. I think the kind of stuff I do, people just think I'm a flat out idiot, and it makes them feel superior, or they can say, yeah, that's happened to me. So I take things one step further than any normal person would take them, because I'm not normal. But mostly it's the identification, I think, that people like.
Yeah, you pointed it out that it seems like they're contradictory, between surprise and
Yeah.
I can relate because that happened to me, or I can't believe this guy's writing about this because
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
just complaining about this, and there's something about being in the same club. I don't know, people like that.
Right. Well, you mentioned before about general interest, and doing reporting. I think the kind of stuff I do pretty often, I report too. I talk with people, I do things. So there's a lot of reporting in that. I mean, I don't do a lot of like off the top of the head stuff. There's not much in the head either. So, but I think that helps me. But no, it's more that people say, geez, it's like you're living in our house. And my stock answer to that is actually I am living in your house and you're out of beer. So please go buy some more. Or I'll get, one time a woman said, I think your columns are very funny. I like them. But what I really like is you never put down your wife and you never use your kids for cheap laughs. Now, I'm not above trying to get cheap laughs, but they're at my expense. And that's where the familiarity comes in, I think. People can relate to that.
Yeah, do you have a rule in the household? It's like, don't write about me, and so it's kind of like territory that you don't want to go there.
Well, the house is pretty much empty. It's a little bit like my head, except for my wife, Sue, without whom I would be either dead or in prison. She doesn't mind at all. The kids are out of the house. We have grandchildren, but they don't live here. But I write about them anyway. But yeah, there's no real hard rule except, again, what the woman said. You never put down your wife, and I never would. If I write about other people, it's always with a positive spin. If I have a bad experience, I just don't write about it. Although, speaking of bad experiences, I mean, if you do what I do, whatever that is, it's always better when things go wrong. So, car trouble, stuff like that. That's rich fodder for columns.
Yeah, and also, like you say, that it's a tough one for anybody, I think, writing humor to understand where your boundaries are because people aren't reading your piece because they want to read a news story. So
No.
you already have a different kind of challenge, and it's like, how far do you go? What's too much? You ever cross that line and later on found out, oh man, there's so many people that think I'm an idiot right now because I didn't know this happened and I made fun of it, and now they think I have no sense. Ever?
Well, I'm actually first in line to think I'm an idiot. And I guess sometimes other people do too, but it's more like where the boundaries there to me there really aren't. I mean, if I go over the line, it's with silliness, like puns and plays on words and things like that. Um, I don't. I mean, I do get a lot of nice reaction from readers, from across the country, but not too often because I don't take on, serious or controversial issues. Aside from, well, these days, like going to doctors is my social life. Um, but there's a couple of times when some people didn't like what I wrote. One time, a long time ago, many years ago, I read something that Lever Brothers, soap people, they did a study and they said it took the average person 4 minutes to take a shower. So I wrote a column saying I can't adjust the water temperature in 4 minutes. And so I went through all the parts of the body that you could mention in a newspaper and how long it took to wash them. And if you wash your hair, you could be in there for 20 minutes. So one woman wrote in saying, cancel my subscription. I'm trying to teach my 4-year-old son that water is precious. And I thought I didn't think I had that sophisticated a readership, but but mostly it's just stuff that people relate to. So it's not controversial. It's just purely for laughs or chuckles or smiles or entertainment. It's that. Everyone else writes serious stuff. So
Yeah, well, That's why newspapers get called the Gray Lady and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
that it's like we need something like that. Um, can you think of something, for example, that was really popular that you had no idea that people were going to like it? You're hoping to get out with your scalp, and yet people are saying, "What a great! You must have thought about that for a week, and you wrote it in an hour."
Well, there have been a few like that where you say, this is good. You're on deadline, and you say that, and then you get a ton of reaction. Oh my God. Um, I can't really think of one right now. But I guess one of the best, one of the nicest ones, and the compliments I got with my first grandchild was born. It was a primer on how to be a good grandfather. And of course, I knew nothing about it because she was like a month old. But I essentially said, my grandchild is the most beautiful grandchild ever born. And I'm sorry if the rest of you think yours is, but they're not. And I got a ton of great reaction to that. You write about the home and you write about family, and you get a lot of great reaction. I'll tell you a couple of quick ones. Once, when my daughters were in high school, the style was to wear plaid flannel pajama bottoms to school. And they've always thought I'm the most uncool man in America. So I decided to prove them wrong. And for one day, and one day only, I wore pajama bottoms to work. But my wife sent me out on some errands. First, she wanted me to go to the bank, and I found a line, 6, 8, 10 people. Nobody wanted to make eye contact with me. So I got up to the teller, and she said, "You going to work like that?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Why don't you go to the store? Why don't you withdraw some money, go to the store, buy yourself a pair of pants?" And I said, I can't. I have to go to the post office. My wife wanted me to pick up a book of stamps. Same kind of thing. So I got the stamps, went to work, and showed up at place of employment wearing pajamas. They let me upstairs at the Stanford Advocate, and I was the head of the newsroom. One woman thought I was wearing golf pants. I don't play golf. Another woman who was the fashion editor told me I was very stylish. She's no longer the fashion editor. Um, and the third woman winked at me and said, "You look cute." I said, "All right." So I worked for the rest of the day. I didn't get up. I left. I went home. My daughters were there, giddy with excitement. I said, "Dad, you're so cool." It's the only time I ever heard it. And I wrote about it, but I didn't put down my daughters. And I got a ton of reaction to that. And one more quick one. One of my daughters, when she was in college, came home, and within 20 minutes, her room looked like a bomb went off. So, the remains of Jimmy Hoffa could have been in there, and you never would have known it. So my wife said, "Lauren's room is a disaster area." So because I think differently than most people, fortunately for most people, I decided to see if I could have her room officially declared a disaster area so we would get state or federal funds to clean it up. I ended up calling the White House, and George W. Bush was in office at the time. And I wanted to know if he had ever declared Janet and Barbara's rooms disaster areas. And I got up to Noelia Rodriguez, who was Mrs. Bush's press secretary, and I asked the question. And she said, "That would be classified information." And I smiled to myself. I said, "Thank you, God. There is a column." And I wrote about it, but I didn't make fun of my daughter. I just wrote it as it happened. So I think if you want to write humor, it helps. I mean, you could look around and write stuff off the top of your head, which sometimes is great, but other times you pursue it. There's a story right there, and but it's worth reporting on. So that's what I did. I just do incredibly stupid things. and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, well, it should be. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I'm trying to remember who it was now, one of our conferences. I think it was Don Black, but a good writing coach, that he asked our group about, okay, when you guys write, there are two different kinds of people, plotters and planners. Either you sit right down and like dive into it, or you have yourself some kind of an outline. Are you a plotter or a planner?
I'm a I don't know if I can plot anything. And I don't really plan. I mean, what I look for is our column topics. Um, for example, I mean, I haven't written this column yet, but I went out with my wife to buy slippers of all things. And you talk to people, and the woman at the store was very funny. So there you go. I'm going to write about that. But a lot of people say, and I'm sure you get this too, and everyone out there gets this. You're a writer. Where do you get your ideas? That must be the hardest thing of all. I decided pretty much at the beginning um, to write about family foibles and the funny little things of everyday life because stuff happens every day. So it's seldom difficult to come up with something to write about. It's what you make of it. So that I guess comes from planning. What you plan to write about, but how you do it too.
Yeah. So I mean, some people keep a notepad like next to their bed, for example, for those ideas that pop up in the middle of the night and carry something around. I ought to use my computer, but I don't. So that's your
This
baby
now
right
wait a
there.
minute. Always, except in the shower.
Yeah.
I always have this, and not one, but two pens in case one runs out of ink. And that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Um, I was talking with somebody, and the pen ran out of ink, and I had the second one. But yeah, I take a notebook with me wherever I go and write stuff down.
Yeah. So you have little, depends on your inspiration and how much you put down. Because sometimes I put things down and it means nothing to me when I look at it a day later. It's supposed to be a prompt, but I
Yeah.
forgot.
Well,
Yeah.
you never know. I mean, if I'm out, I don't get out that often, which is nice for the rest of the world, I guess. But when I do, I bring my notebook because you never know who you're going to run into or what's going to happen. So it's again getting back to reporting. I mean, you can be a humor columnist, but there are things that happen that you jot down or you speak with somebody, and there you go. And you see things. You see something in the an item in the paper or online, and you say, "Oh, that could be a column." I saw something recently about a lighthouse for sale. So I said, "I'm going to try to buy the lighthouse." And I went through with it. It was an auction from the General Services Administration, and so I asked my wife. I said, can we buy a lighthouse? And she said, well, I said, what's our limit? She said $25,000, but just don't win it. But the bidding started at 100,000. But I spoke with this guy from the General Services Administration, who was very funny. I said, thank you. And of course, I didn't win it, but I got a column out of it. So the premise was I'm the least handy man in America. To me, a screwdriver is vodka and orange juice. So I should be the last person on earth to own a lighthouse. But I went through with it anyway, and I got a column out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. You get that little bit of clay in your hand and then you start working with it. Um, Touching on another subject I think we talked about a little bit was the famous screenwriter now I'm forgetting his name, William Goldman.
Yes.
Yeah, that one of his rules in his famous, the best book on screenwriting ever written, and the memorable line is, "Nobody knows anything." Here everybody thinks there's a magic to Hollywood, but one of his great lessons for all of us, I think, is you have to learn to kill your darlings. So
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about. Go
Yep.
ahead, just riff on that, will you?
Well, you can be writing a column and you come up with what you think is a great line, a funny line, or an atrocious pun, which I'm not above, of course. And you're writing away and you think you have this great joke or you have this great line, and it just doesn't fit. So you discard it. Another screenwriter, George S. Kaufman, who wrote for the Marx Brothers, said he would write three jokes that were all funny, but he ended up getting rid of two of them because they didn't quite fit into the scene he was writing. So the same thing with column writing. I think I told you about this guy who we had no hot water in the house. Yeah, it would have given a walrus cardiac arrest in the cold water coming out. So we called this guy to come over to fix the furnace. And I'm talking to him, and he's starting to tell me all these funny stories. How he would somebody pulled a gun on him at night when he was on the night shift, but there were no bullets in the gun. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. And he was telling me about it. And of course, he was okay. But somehow or other, we got on to the Three Stooges. And of course, I am an expert on the Three Stooges. And we were talking about that. I said, "Oh man, this is funny. I can fit it in the column." Well, I wrote the column, so I was writing the column, and I said, I just can't fit that in. I wanted to, but it didn't work, so I discarded it. And that's something I think for people who write humor to know is that whether you are a humor writer, you're a business writer, you're a sports writer, you're a feature writer, you're a food writer, you're an entertainment writer, whatever. The key word there is writer. And it has to work as a written piece. So you say, geez, I like this line, or I like what somebody said, but it just doesn't work. You're writing and it flows really well, but you can't shoehorn that thing in. So you just get rid of it.
Hurts though, doesn't it? When you start out thinking I've got a piece of gold here, and then
Yeah.
when you get done, it's like it just doesn't fit with the
Right. Well, I mean, I've had that happen, and I've kept it in the back of my mind, or what is left of it. And sometimes you can use it in another column. It'll
Mhm.
fit better. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, since you went there, talking about your love of the Three Stooges, uh, that's what we would say is they're the kings of exaggeration. So,
yes,
can you, exaggeration works so well, so often.
it does. Yes, it does. You could do with words what the Stooges did with with slapstick, and it helps humor writer, but subtlety helps as well sometimes. So it depends on what the subject is and what you're writing about. You can do verbal slapstick like the Stooges, or you can be more subtle. And oh, I see something on screen. BR. But anyway, so yeah, the Stooges actually were are my heroes. I have other actually my humor writing heroes are the three Bs: Robert Benchley, Art Buchwald, and Irma Bombeck. They were they were great. I told you about Art Buchwald and Irma Bombeck. I read them when I was a kid or in high school in the Stanford Advocate. And I said, that's what I want to do. And the other guy is Robert Benchley, who I thought is the funniest writer who ever lived. So I I kind of emulated them. And a lot of humor writers say, geez, I'd like to write like, and you fill in the name, Irma Bombeck, for example, or Art Buchwald. And I would suggest, no matter if you're writing humor or whatever, any other kind of writing, sports writing, you be yourself. Uh, as a writer, it's hard enough being yourself without trying to be somebody else. But you pick up um, different moves, like it's like Irma Bombeck or Art Buchwald, and maybe incorporate some of those things into your writing. But eventually, it is you. And so, if you think something is funny, then there's the groundwork right there, and then you take it from there, but you do it in your own way. And there are a lot of really funny writers out there, but I think that whether you're a fan of the Three Stooges or Irma Bombeck or Art Buchwald, eventually you have to be yourself and do it the way you're comfortable with doing it.
Was there ever a point where you came to realize that you did have a voice? I think a lot of us, you start out and it's like, I don't know what my voice is. I'm just reporting. I'm just writing. I don't know how it comes off to other people. So did you ever reach a point where it's like, I kind of know what I'm doing. I got it down.
Well, I don't really have much of a voice because I'm singing impaired, but I developed a style, and yes, you get to the point. Early on, I would say, "Oh, I wonder how Art Buchwald would handle this," and you try to maybe emulate him or Irma Bombeck with a domestic situation, and eventually you find your own voice or your own style. And you say, I think this is funny, I think it's good, I think people will enjoy it. I have to get it past the editors first, but that's really seldom been a problem. So I go with what I think. I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years. Nobody has stopped me. I've written 8 books. The publishing industry somehow is still going. So I just continue to do what I've always done and continue to love it. I think that's what you have to do. You have to love what you do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And when you don't want to be going to bed at night, worried about what you're going to do the next day, that you get some confidence that you're going to be able to answer the bell when the time comes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and just quickly off of what you just said too, that when I first got a column period, and I was still pretty young, but there was a writer in Indianapolis I really thought was good, and I had sat next to him at an awards banquet or something, and told him they were offering me this job and how worried I was and stuff, and he said, "Stop. You're a smart guy, aren't you? Aren't you pretty smart, pretty intelligent? Don't you think you are?" Yeah, sure. He says, "If you think it's interesting, write it. It doesn't matter. You can go crazy trying to figure out who your audience is."
yeah,
So those were great marching words to take off with, I thought.
right. Well, I mean, if that guy asked if I was smart, that would have stumped me right there. But that I think that was great advice. And
Mhm.
if you think it's interesting, or in the case of someone like me, if you think it's funny, then go ahead and write it. Again, it's the most subjective kind of writing, and the world is filled with wonderful people. I really believe that, and people who appreciate a laugh or a chuckle or a smile. There are also a lot of people who will be deeply offended if you say good morning to them, unless you say it in the afternoon, in which case they might have a point. But you can't really worry about that. You just go with your gut and what you feel, and I think that's good advice. If it's good to you, if it's interesting to you, pardon me, or if it's funny, then go ahead and do it, but write it well.
Yeah, exactly. And go back and refine. It's in being a teacher, sometimes I try to hammer at them and say, get it done. And when you come back, you'll be surprised at all the things that you can make better.
Yeah. Well, also, a lot of writers hate, either a word count or they hate deadline. Deadline is your friend because most of
I
us
agree.
are procrastinators. And I'll tell you about that sometime, but not now. But I might be breezing along, tooling along, and I say, wait a minute, I have more to say, but I usually keep it to 650 to 725 words, maybe about 700, I guess, with the tagline. And then you stop and you say, well, if there's something else I want to get in, there's something in there that I have to take out.
Yeah.
So there occasionally I'll go longer, and the news service, the Tribune news service, who's great, or which is great, doesn't mind. But these days, if your stuff is running in print, then you don't want to write too long, or else they're not going to use it, or they're going to, take a chainsaw to it. So it's a word count, but it helps your discipline, helps you write better, helps you write funnier, I think. And deadline is, my deadline, I used to be a really bad boy. I would wait until the very last minute, maybe minute and a half, and then turn in my column. Now I work ahead because what I write about isn't really that timely. It's not coming off the news, but I have a deadline for coming up with ideas. And again, if I have an idea and I think it's going to work, I feel really comfortable about it. And then I know I can do something with it. And then when I sit down to write, I actually have a great time doing that. I kind of entertain myself because there's only a house plant in the office, and that doesn't really say much to me. So anyway, I think that helps too. Any writer, you really need the discipline. And Irma Bombeck had said that you really need to be disciplined if you're a writer. You have to do it, and you have a deadline. You may not feel funny. You may have a headache. Something may have happened that wasn't too pleasant, but you still have to come up with something funny. So it's a matter of discipline too.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of this quote that humor is intelligence having fun?
Well, that's half right. I always have a lot of fun.
I knew you'd have to come back that way.
I'll tell you, one of the best quotes was about humor was by Red Smith, the great sports writer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very witty writer himself. He won a Pulitzer Prize. He was a great stylist. But he said, the true humorist has a mind that functions differently than most and eyes that see past the horizon to discover wondrous things. So you need to train your mind to look for things, look for the offbeat. I think a lot of people, whether they write humor or not, don't see the humor in things when they happen. And it's only later on where you say, oh yeah, remember that time that was, oh sure, last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. Oh, that was very funny. But you don't see the humor in it when it happens. I always do, even in situations that are pretty serious. I'll give you an example. I was driving to work one time, and I was going through a green light, just turned green, and going the speed limit, and the car coming through the opposite direction suddenly turned left, cut right in front of me. We collided. My airbag went off. His car spun around. So, my God, I'm okay. I ran across the street to find out if he was okay. And he rolled down the window. He said, I'm so sorry. He said, it was all my fault. I said, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So I said to him, what happened? And he said, I was looking at my GPS and it told me to turn left here. It was a one-way street. So I said, if you had been watching the road instead of your GPS, you would have seen two things. One, an arrow indicating you were going the wrong way down a one-way street, and two, me. So he said, yeah. So I went back to my car and I wanted to move it over to the right side of the road so I can call my wife and the insurance company, and I couldn't get over because there was a line of cars coming through. It was a funeral procession. The guy in the lead car with the deceased in the back rolled down his window and he said, "Can I do anything for you?" And I said, "Not today." I said, "You're going to have to wait to get business from me." And he smiled. They went through. I pulled over. And I said, just got into an accident. Could have been pretty serious. Nobody got hurt. It was caused by a guy who was looking at his GPS instead of the road. It told him to go the wrong way down a one-way street. And then I tried to pull over and I couldn't because there was a funeral procession. I said, "Thank you, God. There's a column."
Mhm.
I mean, it's almost anything. I mean, obviously, if you you need to survive to write about something, but almost, I mean, that of course would have unnerved people, would have tipped people off. Me, great, manna from heaven. So even something potentially serious, harmful, can be a column. Uh, a lot of people say, "Well, can you find humor in anything?" Pretty much, you can find humor in a. Speaking of funerals, you can go to a funeral, go to a wake, and it's a sad time because the person was a loved one or a good friend or whatever, and you're sad, but then there are other people there, and inevitably, maybe some of the people you haven't seen in a while, and you start talking, and then you start telling stories and laughing. You can find humor pretty much anywhere. It's right in front of you. It's in your home. It's on. It's outside. Um, I because I'm an idiot. I wrote a column recently about speaking of going outside, about how it takes longer to actually leave your house than it does to run your errands and come back. Because, oh, wait a minute, I better go to the bathroom, and then wait, where's my phone? And oh, I wanted where's my water bottle? And oh, the little things, the smallest thing. I find a lot of people want to write about big important stuff. Not me. The smaller, the better, and that's what touches people, I think.
Mhm.
Um, Now, if you are a writer of something other than humor, let's say you're writing a business story, or you're writing a food story, or uh, restaurant review, music review, whatever. Um, can I find humor in that, even if I'm not a humor columnist or a flat out humorist? And yes, because it's always about the story. Unless everything you do is just top of the head stuff, which can work. A lot of people do that, and many of them are pretty good. It's it's the story. So you can incorporate an anecdote in an otherwise serious story, and that'll give it more balance. And it makes a better story, I think. There's some stories that just aren't, uh, you know, ripe for humor. A tragic death, fire, whatever. But almost anything else, even some potentially dry thing, like a business story, you can find someone who says something funny. It could be a sentence, but it helps lighten it up and it gives balance to it. So I think that's a good way to look at it. You can find humor pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, and sometimes in ways that you don't even realize you're touching people, but
Yeah.
in a good way.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yes,
but
sir.
just before we get out of here or anything, that talking to you and talking to the group out here, that this guy, I always think I'm pretty good at puns, and I have a few friends that were punsters, and we drive people crazy. He's better. It's like,
You know why?
and you get people that either love puns or they hate them.
Well, let me tell
You
you.
wrestle with that at all?
No, I'm punning a million. So, uh,
He delivers.
yes, I deliver. People will always say, no pun intended. No, every pun is intended. You just say that if it doesn't work.
Mhm.
Um, but there's another tool you use. It's a play on, plays on words. You can use puns, of course, um, and that's a device to use as well. I won a pun competition when I turned 60. I was the oldest competitor, the only time I had ever entered, and I won a Punderdome. It was in Brooklyn, New York, and I beat I don't know how many people. And the finals were a team of two young guys and me, and I beat them. And so I was the reigning, or mostly cloudy, I guess, Punderdome champ. And I went back 10 years later when I turned 70, which was last year. And they invited me back, and I was really the oldest competitor that time. And I made it to the semifinals, but I acquitted myself very well because I didn't quit. So, and by the way, what I won in the pun contest was a fondue maker. So I gave it to my wife because, of course, it was the least I could fondue. So yeah, yes, that was the kicker for the column. But again, anything can be a column, a funny column.
True, true. And one other just tool to throw out that, how people feel about it, and that's it's often fun to write what's the cliche that comes out of everybody's mouth, and then of course change all the details, so they know what you're getting at, but you're saying, hey, I'm not writing a cliche. I invented a new way of saying that.
Well, I know cliches like the back of my hand, and I think you should avoid them like the plague.
Hmm.
Um, Now, are there people out there who like brave enough to sign up for this? Do they have questions or anything? Like, why the hell did they invite you to do this?
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, Jenny, are you seeing anything here?
Do we have any additional questions? We have had some, and I think we answered a few of them along the way.
we did? Oh,
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, well, anybody that has questions, please, now's the time to do it. And
yes. Yeah, ask away. If I don't have the answer, I'm going to make Mike answer it.
Susan has a question. I'm going to allow her to talk so she can ask her question.
hmm, go for it, Susan. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, she's got the mute on, I think.
Oh gosh, this is like yeah, she's doing a Marcel Marceau imitation.
Yeah, Susan, you see her?
Now you can hear me. Can you hear
Yeah,
me now?
yeah.
Okay,
Susan
now
Rogers, hey, how are you?
it's Susan Adgers.
Susan Adgers, right?
Adgers.
Now,
Yeah,
you know
they're in the
Adgers.
what?
World Series right now. That's
That's right.
good.
No, that
I
was that
know.
was. I knew
I'm
that was
gonna
your
get
name. That
I'm
was
gonna get
just a
one of
test.
those jerseys and just take the D off. Okay, so I was very fortunate this year that I got the Will Rogers Award from the group, and
Yes.
so I've been doing the deep dive to know as much as I possibly can about the man. I even had 3D models of the statue made, different sizes, so I can take Will to all my community meetings, and I'll look over at Will and I'll say, "What do you think? Is this BS or whatever?" It's just been a blast. Anyway, I can send some pictures to Jenny that she can share. But I'm wondering, what's your take on Will and his quips and how he used humor? Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Well, first of all, congratulations. I think that's wonderful. As you now know, where there's will, there's a way. And Will Rogers was the predecessor of Art Buchwald, and he followed Mark Twain. Those three guys were among the greatest American humorists because they they commented on the American scene, and Will Rogers did so in a way that many millions of people loved and could relate to, because I mentioned this earlier. I don't go in for cruel or mean-spirited humor, and neither did Will Rogers. And I think he did this country a great service. When he was tragically killed in a plane crash in 1935, Congress had a moment of silence, and there's a statue of him, I believe, in Washington. But Will Rogers was one of the greatest American humorists. So it's a wonderful thing that you won the Will Rogers Award.
Barbara has a question. Barbara, I think I unmuted you so you could ask.
I was wondering what script you're working on now.
Thank you for asking. A lot of people have said, you're a newspaper columnist. Why don't you write a novel? Why don't you write a screenplay? Why don't you write a children's book? And I say, I don't do those things for the best reason I can think of. I don't want to. But I am writing a sitcom. I wrote the pilot, not the co-pilot, the real pilot, for a sitcom, and it's based on one of my books, The Empty Nest Chronicles. My wife and I would be watching, like going back quite a ways, that Everybody Loves Raymond and shows like that, and my wife said, "Oh, that should be us." And I would say, "Hun, half the people in America say that." And then I thought, it could be. So that's why I actually started writing books, because when you see a show on TV, it'll say based on the book by whomever. So I did that. And the script I'm working on is called The Empty Nest Chronicles. And it's about here's a real surprise, a newspaper columnist and his wife, whose kids have left the nest, but they're close enough where they stop by for to mooch meals and to drop off their stuff. Your nest may be empty of children, but not of their stuff. So that's the premise, and the idea is that the parents want to have a yard sale or a tag sale to get rid of their kids' stuff, and the kids team up to try to prevent that. So that's the script.
Thanks, Jerry. Suzette would like to ask a question. Suzette, you're on.
Suzette.
Jerry, I'm curious, how long does your actual writing of the column take? I'm not including the time that it takes you to percolate on an idea, to interview people, or even to have an experience. But when you Velcro your butt to the chair, how long does that take?
Well, I can't tie myself to the chair, so I Velcro. You know what? It takes days, but in actual time, maybe 3 hours. I haven't timed it, but I will get up, which of course always helps, and sit down with a cup of coffee and start to write. And I seldom will finish a column in one sitting. I could write for an hour or 2 hours and then have lunch, maybe have to run some errands, I'll come back. But if it's too late in the day, I'm not as good. So I'll pick it up the next day. Now, a lot of writers don't like that. They would rather just sit down and finish or write most of it. And you really don't do that because you always have to rewrite. But I would say, 3 hours, 4 hours total. But of course, there's, different columns require more or less time. How about you?
Well, that's a really good question. If I have a really strong feeling about something, I can bang it out in an hour.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of revision. It takes a lot of revision.
Yes. Now, let me tell you, what I found is there are 4 things that happen when you write a column. One is it comes out your fingertips and you've hit it out of the park. Two, it comes out your fingertips and you say, this needs work. So you work on it and you mold it into pretty much what you want and you're done. Three, you work and you sweat and you bleed and it takes forever. And finally, you get it to where you want it. And four, nothing you do can save it. It's just, either you trash it or you do something else. But I know what you mean, Suzette, when you sometimes you can bang it out in an hour, but when you bang something out and you go back, there are always things to do, some polishing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And lots of times it comes from a place other than my fingertips. Enough said. Thank you, Jerry.
Suzette, wait a minute, don't go away. Suzette interviewed me for her TV show, and I guess it'll be available pretty soon. So I will let you know, and Suzette will too. So thank you, Suzette. I had a great time.
You're so welcome, Jerry.
Anyone else?
Yes, Kathy has a question. Kathy, you should be on.
Yeah, hi.
Kathy, you made it.
Oh man.
All the way from Maine.
We will never speak of that again. It didn't like my email, I think. But anyway. How did you get your pilot looked at?
Oh, through, well, who helped considerably? Our NSNC friend and a great guy, a great writer, a very successful writer, Bruce Cameron. I had no idea what I was doing, which I think really helps in any endeavor. But I sent it to him. He gave me some suggestions, and I got it to where I wanted it. And then I just put it on the back burner for a long time. And I had to make sure I didn't turn on the burner or the house would burn down. So anyway, I kept it there. And then I sent it to Andrews McNeil, which is a large syndication company. It syndicates columnists and cartoonists. It has a book publishing arm or a leg, and it has an entertainment division.
Okay.
So I sent this to them, and they don't do things. They don't pick things up unless you're already affiliated with them. But they got hold of me. And one person in Kansas City, another one in Hollywood. And they were on the phone with me for an hour saying, we really like this. We think it's saleable, and this is what you can do. You have to go find a showrunner or an agent, a producer. And so I have a list of names, some of whom I've met through the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, an absolutely great organization with great people, except for me. But, you need contacts. Are you working on something?
I have a screenplay and I also have a pilot.
Okay.
I have a complete screenplay that Marge and I wrote years ago, and I took it out years ago and did some changes and refreshed it, and it's ready to go. But I have the usual, 5 pages of small typed names of places that will not accept unsolicited.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll send you a.
It's really good, by the way.
We can talk. Pardon?
Yeah, it's really good.
It's good. Well, there you go. I mean, who would know better than you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I believe it. And you're a really good and funny writer anyway. And your book, your latest book, the new one, Brain Tumor, is fabulous. Truly one of the best things I've ever read.
Oh, thank you. That's
Even Dark Chocolate Can't
very
Fix This
sweet.
Mess. That's terrific too.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through the sequel for that, but I really want to get this
Wow.
screenplay
By the
going.
way, and I told Suzette, this is why I'm not in sales. This is my latest book.
Oh,
More
good.
the merrier. Laughing at life when everyone thinks you're over the hill. Anyway, but you and I will talk, and I'll see what
Okay.
I can do.
Great,
I
thanks.
mean, we're talking now, but I mean,
Yeah, no.
right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Anyone else?
Yeah,
That's all we have in the
essentially,
Q&A. Does anyone else have anything?
well, I was just going to say, since he was showing a book there, that's for anyone who's interested, we can get this. This guy, Mel Hellitzer, and he was with our group for a while,
Hold
and
on.
he was the first professor to start a 4-credit humor writing class at a major university, and in this case, Ohio University, which has a Scripps School of Journalism.
Now, wait a minute. There we go. And
Yeah, it's full of good information.
yes, and he signed it for me.
He
Yeah.
signed mine better.
Wow, he did. To Jerry Zezima, the winner of the best jokes at the conference. Best wishes. This is 1991.
Wow.
Mhm.
Now let's see. I think that was in Mystic,
91.
Connecticut. 91, I believe, or it could have been in West Virginia. One of the two.
Yeah, it could have been West Virginia just because Ohio's pretty close, Ohio University.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, and if you're interested, he breaks a lot of things down in an academic way that it's hard to break down humor, but he does a good job of all kinds of things, rules of 3 and things like that that
oh
are good
yes,
for
right. The
writers to know.
rules of 3, right? Well, Mo, Larry, and Curly, or maybe Shemp. I like Shemp.
Yeah, well, you and a couple other people, I guess.
Yeah.
But he's better than Joe DeRita, I guess.
Yes, or Joe Besser. So, anyone else?
I think that's the end of our questions. Do you have any closing thoughts before we go tonight, before we wrap up?
Closing thoughts. Well, enjoy. A lot of people say, writing humor is the hardest kind of writing, but the result is the best kind of reading. So maybe that is true, but use humor in your writing. If you're a humor columnist, then obviously you have to be funny, but you can use it in other kinds of writing as well. And train yourself to see the humor when it happens. Now, a lot of humorists aren't particularly funny in real life. A lot of comedians aren't. But if you're funny in what you do, and it's, like in newspaper writing, then it's the best job on earth. It's not. It's work, but it's not. It's great.
Yeah, I'm just glad to be on this panel with this guy and be able to call him a colleague and a friend. So for
Well,
all of
Mike,
you out there,
tell you,
read more Jerry.
You're terrific. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you, and you're doing well. Ginny, thank you so much. And the National Society newspaper columnist, I thank you for lowering your otherwise high standards to have me as a member.
You're a wonderful, treasured member, and thank you to everybody for being here tonight. What a great talk we had with Jerry and Michael, and thank you to you both for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.